Hello, my lovely friends out in YouTube. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Patty. I go by Pattymac Makes everywhere online. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I made a really pretty fall placemat. I would call this a super easy project, and it is, but it's not. What makes this project really easy is that I used pre-quilted material, and all I had to do was cut the placemat from the material. No quilting necessary. What makes it not so simple is that I decided to use a standard quilt binding to finish my edges. So here's the project. This is one of the finished placemats, and you can see it's really super pretty. This is what I decided I wanted for the front of the project, and then the back was a coordinating solid. So the fabric came like this, and I'm going to show it to you in a minute. This video is a placemat video. I mean, that's what we're going to make. That's our final project. What it really is about, it's a quilt binding video. And if we go forward with any type of a quilting project, we're going to need binding. So I find binding to be difficult. I'll be honest with you. I'm always honest with you. I also machine sew my bindings. The old school proper method is to sew the binding onto the project, flip it around, clip it on, and then hand sew the back. You will get your best result doing that. No doubt, no question, that's going to be the best possible finish and look. It also takes a long time. It takes a really long time. And if you're like me, you're kind of pressed for time, and when you're going to make something like a placemat, you just need to kind of roll through and get it done. And that's what today's project is. So I want you to think about this placemat as being a skill builder for you in terms of the quilt binding, because all you're going to have to do is cut your fabric and put your binding on. And you can make as many as you want. I made 4. If you wanted to make more, you could do that. And I would recommend it because this is really a great skill builder. So let me show you the fabrics that I used. This is a scrap that's left over, and it's a Joann fabric. I have a nice Joann fabrics here, and I enjoy their stuff. I happened to see this kind of on the end of the aisle where they had the premium quilting cottons. So they have this line of already quilted stuff, and you can see the batting is at the bottom. Here's your selvage line. So we know that this is our green line, straight of green, and we know this is our cross green. So it's so nice because it's already quilted. I didn't have to do anything. I just bought it, and it has a solid side and it has a printed side, and they have like several of these in there. And then what I did was picked what I wanted as a contrasting fabric to make the binding. And I went with this beautiful warm gold. I bought it to do the quilt binding and to make napkins. And I have a video that I'm going to pair with this one on making cloth napkins. Here it is with the fabric. And so the way that I picked this color was I looked at this flower, and I really liked that warm gold. And so this is just kind of my non-traditional take on a fall placemat. Let's jump into today's video, and I'll see you on the other side. Here is what I used to make today's project, which is the quilted placemat with a contrasting border. You can see the fabric is here, and I used an already quilted fabric. So all I had to do was to cut my placemat fabric to size, and then I selected a contrast fabric, which is here, and I cut 2 strips on width of fabric to serve as my quilt binding for this project. So those are your fabrics you'll need. The tools you'll use to make the already quilted placemat is a cutting mat, a 6x24" quilting ruler, a triangle ruler. You're going to, believe it or not, use some office supplies. If you have Wonder clips or binding clips, you can use those. I used my large paper clips and these binder clips here to hold the quilt binding onto the quilted fabric. I also wound up needing some straight pins. I used a rotary cutter, a disappearing ink pen, thread snips, and scissors, and the cutting mat. You'll also need a sewing machine with thread and a really good steam iron and ironing board. To sew the placemats for today's project, I have already cut out the pieces, and here's what we have. This is the fabric that I picked up. It was already quilted. I thought it was so pretty. So all I had to do was cut that out. And this fabric measures 13 by 20 inches. And it's got a right side and a wrong side. And I'm choosing the floral as my right side. So it's nice because you have both. I just decided I like the floral for my front. And the way we're going to finish this placemat is we're going to do a standard quilt binding. And what I have done is cut my fabric for the binding. I have selected a contrasting color to go with this, and I made this color selection based off this flower. So this yellow is pretty close to that flower, so that's how I arrived at that color. So I have cut on the width of the fabric 2 strips, and each strip measures 2 1/4 inches. So the first thing that we will do in making our placemat is to construct the binding. And so what we will do to construct the binding is I'm going to put the fabrics together, right sides together. They're going to be at 90-degree angles. And I'm going to take that triangle quilt ruler. I'm going to use the triangle quilting ruler to then mark a 45-degree angle from edge to edge. And I use the disappearing ink pen to make a stitch line. Once I've got the line marked, then I will pin the fabric together. I will go onto the machine and I will sew right along that stitch line. When the fabrics are together, I will cut the excess away. I will leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I will then press that seam open. I'll take it over to the ironing board and press the seam open, and then when it's pressed open, I will fold the binding basically in half. So I'm going to meet the short sides together, and I'm going to, on the ironing board, using the hot iron, press this binding strip the whole length. So it'll be pressed into one long strip. One end I will take and I will fold it under, and I will press that under, and that's so that I will have a finished edge on the binding where they meet. You don't want to have a raw edge of your fabric where you put the binding strips together on the placemat. You want to have that finished. So we're just going to steam press that down, fold it under, and that will be the finished edge. So now we're going to put the binding onto the placemat, and I start on a long edge, and I use just binder clips like office supplies to attach the binding to the project, and I just attach only on the side that I'm working on right then. So I put it on. I start about maybe 1/3 of the way down. You definitely want to leave some space, like don't start stitching at that edge. Leave maybe 3 inches or so. You want to give yourself some room. Just leave that there, and then you're going to stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Stitch all the way to the corner. what I wind up doing is I mark that binding with my triangle ruler, and I mark the 1/4 inch line. That's where I stop sewing, and then I will turn the project and sew at a 45-degree angle into that corner. Once that's done, I pull the placemat off of the sewing machine, cut the thread, and then I'm going to use that triangle again to help me fold the binding. So when you go to fold the quilt binding, you're going to I use the triangle. I like that because it gives me the perfect angle. I fold over, I get that 45-degree angle in the corner like I'm supposed to have, and then I fold it parallel to the next edge, and then I'm going to clip that into place with the binder clip. Mark our 1/4 inch line so that we know where to stop sewing. And you can see why I like this particular triangle, because it's so easy for me to see my 1/4 inch measurement. And I just do that, and then so there I have my mark. I know exactly what to do. It's kind of like training wheels, but I like training wheels. I find the binding to be fairly difficult, so I like to give myself as much grace and assistance as possible. So that's why I'm showing you this. Okay, so when I get back to the machine, I'm going to use the leader, and we're going to start the leader, and then we're going to sew right on to the binding, and it's the 1/4 inch seam all the way around. All right, my leader's in place. I'm ready to go. Let's put our work on the machine. I will tell you that a lot of people, more advanced people, will use the walking foot when they put the binding on, and it's because your binding can creep a little bit because of the way the fabric is fed through in terms of the feed dogs on the bottom and not on the top. So you can see this has creeped a little bit, but I knew about when to stop. So I know not everybody has a walking foot. So this is how you do it if you don't have a walking foot. Okay, just be mindful when you get to your end of where your 1/4 inch line is. So I'm going to use that triangle again. Your first step is to fold the fabric at that 45-degree, and I like this because you can see like I'm getting a really sharp 45-degree angle, and then I just slide it out. Okay. Let me move in closer. Okay, so I put that triangle right in there. I fold over. There's my true 45. I'm going to slide that out gently and then just kind of finger press that. And then you're going to fold that fabric over so that it's going on the long ways, the new direction, in other words. And we want this to match our bottom exactly. So Okay, and now I'm going to just clip on across this side, and I'm going to do all the rest of the corners the same way. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how we'll have our bindings meet up. We're back to the beginning. I've got the work still under the machine, and you can see here's where we started. Here's the initial stitch line. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just tuck this in. And there's going to be a little waste, but you know, it's all right. Don't freak out about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay it over top, and I'm going to make sure that I have a nice amount of overlap, because you can always trim, but you can't cut longer. It's like hair, okay? Only in this case, the fabric doesn't grow back. You just have to rip everything out and start over. We don't want to do that. So I'm going to cut about here, because I know it's plenty under there. Okay. And we have about maybe an 8-inch tail. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck this in and just try to get it as neat as possible. Now we'll tell you this part's a little bit tricky, and because we're not using the walking foot, we're going to have a little bit of an issue getting everything to kind of snug in and be as flat as we would like. It looks fine once you turn it and finish it. Don't worry about that so much. Just get the binding on the placemat. Okay, so I'm going to hold it in place, and we're going to just come right on along. And I've got a little bit hanging off, but that's because the way it's tucking in. So just don't lose your mind over that. All right, here we go. Now just lift your presser foot, get that edge under, and then just come on through. Now we're just going to ease that fabric in. Okay. So you might wind up with a little bit of a tuck. Don't worry about that, because when you turn it, you can't see it. So it'll be our secret. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of trim that little bit up, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to turn your edges. Our binding is attached to our placemat, and you can see we've got these like little funky things in all of our corners, and that's what you want. You want that extra material, because what we're going to do is we're going to turn the corners, and when you flip it over, see how you've got that nice little mitered edge. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all of my corners around, and I'm going to take this placemat over to the ironing board. And what I'm going to do is just give it a really good press, and press against the seam and make sure all of this is nice and opened up. Okay? And I'll come back after I've pressed it out, and then what we're going to do is to turn the work over, and then we're going to flip that binding, and then I'm going to machine stitch everything on, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, our placemat is pressed out, and you can see that gives you a really nice, beautiful look. So now what we've got to do is we've got to fold it over, or flip it over, and we are going to then fold over the binding just like this. And this is where I use my clips. So that's how I use the paper clips. I know it looks funny, but it's what I have, and I don't like to stick myself with the straight pins, which is what happens when I use straight pins. When you get to your corners, you're going to have a hard time flipping over unless you take some of this bulk out, but you need to be very, very careful that you don't cut your stitches. Okay, so you can see here we've got stitches, and there. So what we want to do is I would go on this side, and I would just take a little clip off right there. Let's just turn it this way so we can really see what we're doing. Because if you clip through this, you're going to have a hole, and a hole is not what we want. I'm just going to take that little bit off. And that will help with the miter. I think it's hard to get the mitered corner on the back, to be perfectly honest. Okay, so that's what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and take it over to the machine, and we're going to start stitching. And we are going to start... We're going to start over here, and what I'm going to do is line it up, and I'm going to stitch in the ditch as much as I can right here. And then what will happen is by stitching in the ditch here, it catches the back side. So that way you can finish it up right away. Now you could, if you wanted to, you could do it the old school method, and you could certainly hand stitch all of this down. But that's no problem. I'm going to machine stitch, and I always stitch in the ditch here on the front, and then it catches the back. So let's go to the machine and do that now. When you get back to that join that we did at the end, it is a pretty big thickness of fabric. You might have trouble getting over that hump. So what you can do is take that fabric that was left over from where you cut the tail from the binding and lift your presser foot, put it under the back side of the presser foot. That helps this to have a little more height in the back, and then you can get the machine to sew over that hump. Just helps the what happens is if you're going over a big thickness of fabric, the presser foot can't get itself over. So if you give it a little height in the back end, it gets over the hump. So that's today's video. Drop a comment below about what color combinations you're going to use in your fall placemats, because I know you're going to make this. I know that you're struggling with quilt bindings. I see you out there. I know that you are. So just jump in and have some fun and make this, and don't flip out about getting it perfect. Just keep doing it. That's how you're going to get yourself over the hump. That's how you're going to learn. You're going to have to to do it, make a mess. Don't worry about it. Just keep going. We make progress in life by jumping in and making a mess and then just cleaning it up and continuing to practice. And don't be afraid to make a mistake. It's not a big deal. It is something you have to develop a feel and a knack and a technique for it. So just keep doing it, jump in there, do the quilt bindings, and make sure that you make the coordinating napkins, which are coming up in the other video. I will link to it as soon as it's up. I don't know if this one's going up first or the other one, probably the other one. So we'll link to the napkins. Okay, that's what I have for you. I sure appreciate you being here if you made it all the way to the end. Thank you so much. And like, subscribe, share, all the stuff, all the things. Keep it positive, keep it happy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.